I'm about to say something very controversial. Ready? I love Green Lantern.
I don't think you can legally say that.
You sure about that?
That's right, this dude here, that's my guy. I love Green Lantern. The characters, the mythos, everything about him. Or them, should I say, since Green Lantern isn't just one person, but a core that spans the entire galaxy. Green Lantern has always been a favorite of mine. Maybe it's because of the powers, the costume, or perhaps just my fondness for the color green. There are just so many things to love about the Emerald Guardian. The space travel, the worlds we explore, the fact that there are just so many to choose from, any of whom I can understand being your favorite. My order goes Hal, Kyle, John, Guy, Jessica, and Simon. And that's just human lanterns. If you want, you can throw Chip, Kilowog, and Tomar Ray in there, but then you get some conflict to see who breaks into my top 5. There's also Alan Scott, but he's kind of hard to place considering his ambiguous status with the Green Lantern Corps. So yeah, Green Lantern, great. Hats off to Bill Finger and Martin Nodell for creating the character back from the 40s. And special thanks to John Broome and Gil Kane for bringing him to the modern age, the 1950s.
Let's all go to the lobby.
But why have I called you all here today? Is it just to glaze over DC's best capeless crusader? Well, I wish. My dream would be to see the Lantern mythos get as much love and attention from the big wigs at the movie studios as good old Batbrain himself gets. But that's not the world we live in today, is it?
You're living in a f***ing dream world.
No, today Green Lantern's reputation is at best non-existent, and at worst, well, it ain't a glowing endorsement. This character has had it rough over the last couple years, with every opportunity for a live-action appearance being struck down by the higher-ups at Warner Brothers. My guy is lucky to get an animated movie once per decade. So I want to rectify this. I want to work towards repairing the reputation of DC's best space cop. Tell you a bit about the character and the core itself. Let's see if I can share with you a bit of my appreciation for the mythos and show you why this character is worth giving another shot on the silver screen. So in case you couldn't tell already, I've got a great fondness for the Green Lantern. A fondness that I'm sure plenty of you out there share. But I make these discussions not just for those who agree with me and just like the sound of my voice, but also for those who are interested in learning more about the topics we dive into here. And heads up, we're going to be focusing on the pre-New 52 origin for just about all the characters we'll be discussing today. So for those of you who are wondering, who is Green Lantern? Green Lantern is a character originally created all the way back in the 1940s. However, back then he wasn't exactly the high-flying space cop that we know him as today. No, this is a different tale. A tale of one Alan Scott, a railroad engineer who, after surviving a terrible train crash, discovered a mysterious lantern which within it housed a green flame. The flame would speak to Mr. Scott, explaining how it fell to Earth millennia ago. It then instructed this railroad engineer how to forge it into a ring which would grant him amazing abilities like generating force fields, projecting energy beams, and flight. From here, Alan would defend America from those who sought to rain terror onto her people. He would go on to be a founding member of the Justice Society of America, or JSA, the first superhero team in comics. Or it would be if their stories were actually about them teaming up, and not just a bunch of heroes huddled around a table talking about past adventures as though they were reminiscing about the glory days at a gentleman's club to a bunch of their golfing mates. But enough about Alan. He's old, out of fashion, and his ring doesn't even work on wood.
This thing ain't a comic book!
Let's instead move on to the much more iconic and my personal favorite Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Hal is, put simply, a badass. Even before donning the ring, dude was a test pilot for Ferris Aircraft, pushing the most high-tech fighter jets to their limits. Man would have fit right in with Tom Cruise in the cast of Top Gun. This, however, all changed when a dying alien who goes by the name of Abin Sur abducted and bestowed the fighter pilot a ring that would grant him immense power. Abin Sur would entrust this responsibility to Jordan, explaining that the ring has chosen him, and now he must carry on this never-ending fight to protect this space sector from all those seeking to do it harm, including Sur's rival, Atrocitus. From here, Hal would be inducted into the Green Lantern Corps, and we would be introduced to the incredible expansive universe DC has to offer, meeting aliens of all different walks of life. Hal is granted the chance to train with such legends as Kilowog, a tough-as-nails drill sergeant-esque rhino-looking alien being, as well as Tomar Ray, this fish-looking guy you see here.
They got humanoids crossed with fish and stuff. I mean, we are screwed, people.
And fun fact about him, he was actually in charge of the sector planet Krypton was housed in. I guess he was sick that day it, blew up.
Krypton was in my space sector.
Good job.
And how can I forget the Brutus to Hal's Caesar, Sinestro? A guy who, if the name didn't already give it away, is actually a completely swell guy with nothing sus about him. So color me surprised, literally,
Oh, brother, this guy's pretty good.
when he goes on to one day oppose Hal and the rest of the Corps, starting his own team of miscreants that he dubbed the Sinestro Corps. I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up the Smurf-looking alien committee running this police outfit, this being none other than the Guardians of Oa themselves. They've tasked themselves with overseeing the Corps, ensuring each space sector has an officer deployed to protect it. They are powerful, knowledgeable, wise, and incredibly boring. Honestly, these guys are the least interesting part of the mythos. I mean, outside of the chill one named Ganthet, who I guess got high in the break room of Chip when the others weren't looking, I couldn't tell you a thing about these guys. A bunch of big-headed, holier-than-thou Muppets who prattle along about rules and laws and maintaining order. Meanwhile, they take every opportunity they can to obstruct and undermine their most promising of officers. I mean, it's no wonder Sinestro left. But moving away from the space sci-fi epic brewing in the background, back on Earth, Green Lantern also plays a huge role in a number of different milestone moments in DC's history. Hal was present for the forming of the Justice League in the 1960s, becoming a founding member. He partook in the seminal event Blackest Night, where he united the Green Lantern Corps to stop the villainous Necron. He was also there for a little story you might have heard of called the Death of Superman. He formed a lasting friendship with fellow emerald-clad hero Green Arrow, and what followed was the two of them embarking on a quest across the United States to help out the homeland and find America. I mean, come on, that's basically a superhero goofy movie. And if you weren't convinced, this story also ends with hero Hal Jordan recruiting another most iconic member of the Corps, John Stewart. Don't worry, we'll get to him in a bit. So yeah, Hal's got a lot of great stories, and I mentioned before that he's my personal favorite Green Lantern. First off, I just love the type of character he inhabits. The cocky, arrogant pilot who does one thing and does it better than anyone else. Hal's the kind of guy with a lot of problems, but they all seem to disappear once he's in the sky. This makes him his own worst enemy when on the ground, such as constantly screwing things up with his on-again, off-again girlfriend and boss, Carol Ferris. We're also going to ignore that weird relationship he had with fellow Lantern Arissa. Regardless of what he's got going on in his personal life, he's always willing to put it all on the line if it means helping someone else out. An idealist who makes decisions based on what's right and never out of fear, Hal stands as a unique member of the Green Lantern Corps, never failing to summon just enough willpower to hold back the forces of evil. Most of the time. He's also half Jewish, so that's neat. I could go on gassing up my boy Hal, but in truth, he needs no more praise than me telling you to go check out some of his runs, particularly Hard Traveling Heroes, Emerald Dawn, and Blackest Night. But here's the thing. I get it if you're not totally sold on the guy. Maybe you're over the cocky fighter pilot with an attitude phase. In that case, the rest of the mythos has got you covered with a cavalcade of different icons taking up the mantle. You'd prefer a more by-the-book military-style leader? Well, John Stewart's got you covered. You'd rather a more lighthearted, fun-loving, creative type in the role? Well, then Kyle Rayner is your man. You'd prefer to see a bull-headed ginger jackass fresh off of chugging a six-pack of Budweisers after a crushing defeat at the Bruins game take on the mantle? Well, pretty specific, but wait till you meet Guy Gardner. Or my cousin. I would be remiss if I didn't give a little bit more to these characters, since so far I've shown a lot of favoritism to Hal, and a bit of disparaging unkindness to Alan. So let's look at the other Lanterns. The second Green Lantern to debut in the Silver Age of comics was none other than Guy Gardner. Guy first appeared in Green Lantern issue 59 in sort of a what-if story. Up until this point, it was believed that Hal Jordan was the only person on Earth most worthy to don the mantle of Green Lantern. However, it was revealed that there was another equally worthy individual out there in the world, this being Guy Gardner. Because Hal just so happened to be a little bit close to Abinsur's spaceship when it landed, the Ring decided to go with him. But in this what-if, we see what would have happened if that wasn't the case. In the issue in question, Hal and the Guardians are looking at a machine that would tell them this tale. And in it we see school teacher Guy Gardner take up the responsibility of being the protector of Sector 2814. And for the most part, he pretty much just did exactly what Hal did. Created a secret identity, defended the world against alien threats, and served honorably amongst the Corps. It's actually pretty remarkable how little a difference this makes. A fact Hal Jordan himself even notes, saying that they do everything about the same. However, Guy's tenure as Green Lantern would be short-lived after a mission on an alien planet leaves him infected with a virus. And because of the nature of their rings not being able to affect the color yellow, and I know I gave Alan a hard time for the fact that his ring couldn't affect wood, but most other rings can't affect the color yellow, but future stories will go on to drop that weakness, so it's kind of a non-issue. Anyways, Guy's on death's door, and in his final moments he summons the only other person on the planet Earth that the ring considers most worthy to wield its power, which ironically enough ends up being Hal Jordan himself. The story concludes with Hal going to visit Guy Gardner in his hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. This time in the real world, not that weird dreamscape. The two strike up a quick friendship, and Hal remarks to himself that there's no one quite like Guy. And that's pretty much all we'll see of Guy for a good long while. He's pretty much just the second runner-up for the Green Lantern ring should anything happen to Hal. And for a good long while, he doesn't even know it. A lot of Guy's, for the lack of a better word, asshole tendencies wouldn't be on display in these issues. And in fact, it wouldn't be until later on do we even ever see him don a Green Lantern ring himself. Which, funny enough, led to his demise by an antimatter wave merely one issue after getting his first ring. Wasn't even anything he did wrong, just a broken power battery and bad timing. Yeah, it's just about his kind of luck. He would, of course, come back, as it turns out he wasn't dead, but simply sent to the Phantom Zone, because, you know, comic books, and that's just the logic we're working with. He would then be sent to another dimension, and then when finally brought back, he was brain dead. But the Guardians worked their magic and were able to revive him, which I theorize is what caused that massive personality shift. Because afterwards, he's finally acting like the Guy Gardner we all know and, well, we know. He'd also finally donned that signature bowl cut. As a Green Lantern, though, Guy is stubborn, brash, rude, and at the end of the day, just a flat-out jerk. But that kind of is what makes him fun. You know, there's plenty of heroes who are kind and helpful to others, but when Guy's on the scene, you never know what you're gonna get. His unique blend of humor, sarcasm, and dry wit, along with the ability to never stop making situations worse for himself, makes him sort of one of a kind. And with a few moments of quiet introspection, there are hints that there's more to him than just the blustering buffoon we see before us. He also once pissed Batman off so much they knocked his lights out for an entire issue. It's worth checking out his entire run on the Justice League International for this scene alone. I mentioned before that Guy did not have a ring after his first appearance, and would remain powerless for dozens of issues to follow. However, Guy's successor would at least get a chance to train a little bit for the role. Yes, the successor to Hal would be granted a successor of his own. Guy would be rendered hospital-bound as a result of him trying to save a school bus full of kids, resulting in him getting hit by said bus and being confined to a hospital bed for the foreseeable future. But you can't have Hal flying around without backup, and so we would see the debut of the next Earth-based Green Lantern, John Stewart. Initially debuting in Green Lantern issue number 87 between 1971 and 1972, John Stewart is the third candidate to be chosen to join the Green Lantern Corps, but the second Earth-based wielder in his continuity. After Guy's little tango with a school bus, the Guardians reached out to Hal, informing him that they have selected their next backup candidate. They tasked Hal with tracking the man down and making him an offer he cannot refuse. Now, John is a former military man, originally serving in the Marines, but ever since returning, has been struggling to find work as an architect. He also faces a great deal of racial prejudice on account of being, a black guy in the 70s, a fact his initial stories do not shy away from. Hal's first introduction to the fledgling Green Lantern would be when John is addressing a couple of police officers, accosting some guys just playing a game of dominoes on the sidewalk. After this initial first impression, Hal has a few concerns that he tries to address with the Guardian, but the Guardian shuts it down immediately, saying he will not hear of his earthly bigotries. The conversation stops just shy of Hal countering these accusations of racism by claiming he's got plenty of black friends, and one ginger if you count Guy, as the police officers back down and John is left to go on his merry way. John makes his way to a candy shop. This was a comic book for children in the 70s, remember that. Makes his way to a candy shop where he has an encounter with Hal Jordan, and after making the offer, John tells him he's willing to give it a shot. And that's really John Stewart's origin. No flashy action scenes or dramatic backstory. This isn't an act of desperation, but instead just one man walking up to another and offering him a job. Which, to be honest, is kind of the most relatable superhero origin story I've ever seen. The Green Lantern Corps practically put out a help wanted sign after one of their workers got put on medical leave. This whole encounter reminds me of the time I was shopping with one of my friends, and then this guy in a military uniform came up and tried to recruit us into the army. Unfortunately for him, my buddy and I were still in school at the time and had enough on our plate as is, but it was a solid enough pitch. Also, trust me when I say him and I, we're not military material. My bad, we're supposed to be talking about Green Lantern here and not my awkward encounters at the grocery store. After learning the basics, John's first mission has him tasked with watching over a senator, who they had reason to believe was in the crosshairs of an assassination attempt. Unfortunately for John, this guy isn't exactly the most open-minded of individuals. And in fact, he would— Jesus Christ! I don't think I can show half of what he's saying without getting in trouble with community guidelines. Yeah, not even for educational purposes is this gonna fly. So let's just cover that up, and if you want, you can go check it out on your own. Hal tasks himself and John with watching over this politician, and they are forced to listen to him prattle on about his hateful nonsense, to which Hal remarks that this lunacy is the price we pay for freedom of speech. It is then that an attempt is made on the senator's life. Hal immediately springs into action, but John stays back, not convinced that everything in this situation is what it seems. Hal apprehends the would-be assassin, but is shocked to find John is nowhere to be found. As it turns out, the second Green Lantern is out in the parking lot, dealing with another would-be murder in the making. After stopping the second gunman, the senior Green Lantern officer arrives to reprimand the rookie, shouting at him that he's a disgrace to the Corps for abandoning his post. Despite his anger, John steadies himself and requests that Hal hear him out since he doesn't have all the facts. Shortly after, John explains that the gunman that Hal's dispatched was actually just a decoy, and that the senator was never in any real danger. Hal unloads the gun and is shocked to find it is filled with blanks. Meanwhile, the criminal in the parking lot was armed with a deadly semi-automatic. This was supposed to be a setup to frame the black community for this evening's violence, and it was none other than the senator himself who organized the whole affair. And once Hal and the rest of the officers confirm John's story, the charade is up and the senator is taken to prison. Look at that. Crimes instigating violence being met with jail time. If only that's how things would work in the real world. With the day saved, John and Hal reflect over the events of this evening. Hal laments and apologizes over not trusting John's intuition. And John doesn't hold it over Hal, claiming it's something that he has to deal with on a daily basis. And it's because of this that Hal understands that maybe there are some issues in this world he himself is blind to, thus necessitating the need for a Green Lantern that offers an additional perspective. And moving forward, that's what John would be. A Green Lantern who would take up the role whenever Hal was out of commission. Unfortunately, at the time, only one Green Lantern would be active per space sector, but eventually they would amend this and allow Earth to have multiple ring bearers, because, we're the main characters of the galaxy. But this restriction did lead to a few funny stories, like this one time Hal slipped in the shower and knocked himself out for the entire issue. The ring wasn't able to revive him, so it just made its way over to John, and tasked him with, I think it was saving Christmas. But by the mid-80s and early 90s, we would see multiple Green Lanterns operating at any given time. It was also around then that John's personality would come into its own. This is in contrast to his earlier appearances where, remember, he still is a black guy, being written by a white guy in the 70s, so he doesn't have a lot of subtlety to his character. He would mellow out with time and eventually become the Green Lantern we recognize. The direct and to-the-point military man who puts duty and responsibility above personal feelings. Also, I can proudly say he held up the Green Lantern tradition of sleeping his way across the galaxy, including getting in the bed of his own personal drill sergeant, who at the time was Katma 2 and not Kilowog. Though, that would have been real courage if it was. By the 90s, we had 3 active Earth-based Green Lanterns functioning at the same time, oftentimes working together in order to overcome greater threats. Each lantern would bounce off of one another, showing what makes them different, along with at least one member taking up a role in the Justice League. And moving back to Hal for a sec, he got a lot of opportunities to show off his skill and leadership, taking charge over the rest of the Corps. I can't think of anything horrible that would tarnish his reputation.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
Alright, I knew we were gonna have to get to this at some point. In the comics, shortly after the death of Superman and the destruction of Coast City, there's this arc where Hal Jordan goes insane. The result of this is him taking out the entire Green Lantern Corps. Turned out he was possessed by the energy being Parallax, resulting in him going mad with power and nearly destroying the DC universe. Luckily for fans of both John and Guy, both were inactive as Green Lanterns at this point, so they were spared from the ensuing carnage. Though, not my guy Kilowog. Sorry, man. But with the entire Green Lantern Corps destroyed, only a single Guardian managed to survive, and in a last act of desperation, fled to the only planet in the galaxy that could solve this crisis. Earth, where all the main characters live. And it was here he would seek to bestow one final soul the last remaining Green Lantern ring, with the added benefit of never needing to be charged and being able to affect the color yellow. And that worthy soul was the last Green Lantern we'll be discussing today, Kyle Rayner. Kyle's story makes him a little bit different from the other 3 we've mentioned. While the others almost had a core that they could rely on if anything had gone wrong, in Kyle's case, at least cosmically speaking, he's all alone. Before being granted this power, Kyle was just a down-on-his-luck artist who can't seem to hold down a job, let alone a girlfriend, just trying to figure out what he's going to do for his future. It is one night while he is out on the town does he encounter the last remaining Guardian, Ganthet, and in his final words, he would utter a single message that would inform Kyle's story from then on. You shall have to do. I suppose it wasn't the most encouraging thing he could have said. Then he tosses in the ring and disappears into a blinding light. Not sure if this was really happening or if the edibles had just finally kicked in, but Kyle says screw it and puts on the ring anyway. And with that, he is imbued with the last remaining spark of the Green Lantern Corps. And from here, Kyle crashes on the pages of the next Green Lantern. Literally, because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And this makes for an interesting change-up, because up until now, Green Lanterns have always had some form of training to make sure each one's up to speed. But Kyle gets no such privilege. So he goes to the only person in this world he trusts, his ex-girlfriend. I guess it wasn't a very long list. After showing up unannounced and in the middle of the night, Kyle's ex, Alex, begrudgingly lets him in where he shows her the ring, though probably not the ring most girls are hoping for. But after showing her what he can do, Kyle makes a proposition. Both of them want more out of life. Neither is where they want to be in their career. And since nothing's really holding them to whatever city they're in now, he posits that they should move to New York and she could act as his photographer, taking pictures of his heroics and selling them to local news outlets. Basically wants to go halves in the responsibilities of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Him as the superhero, her as the photographer. Which actually is a pretty good idea when you think about it. And lucky for Kyle, the very next day, a supervillain strikes his hometown, offering him the perfect opportunity to put this ring to use. And though it's challenging, he does manage to overcome the odds and come out on top. But it's very clear he still has a lot of work to do before he's ready to take on the big leagues. As a Green Lantern, Kyle has a lot in common with Hal, namely the self-destructive streaks, along with his carefree, flirtatious attitude. However, what separates him from the rest is his far more creative mind. While the others had no shortage of inventive constructs, and John himself was a type of artist, being an architect and all, Kyle's creations were on a whole different level, building giant pinball tables, mechanized exo armors, and a whole manner of just weird concoctions. Artists had a lot of fun working with Kyle, allowing his constructs to push the bounds of the comic book itself. Kyle's stories would take us to new corners of the DC universe we've never seen before, exploring new horizons, and delving even further into the Green Lantern mythology. Unfortunately, his stories would also be roped in some controversy due to the short-lived nature of his original love interest, Alex. Yeah, unfortunately, she kinda got the short end of the stick, resulting in her untimely demise. To add insult to injury, this would go on to become a permanent stain on Kyle's legacy, similar to that of when Ant-Man struck the Wasp. But let me set the record straight. Did this story prematurely kill off a potentially fan-favorite character just for shock value?
Yeah.
Was her death unnecessarily gruesome and completely out of tone with the rest of the story?
Yes.
But let me make it clear here, that was not Kyle's doing. No, that was the villainous Major Force who did this. For those of you wondering, what happened was after a run-of-the-mill adventure, Kyle came home to greet his girlfriend Alex, only to find her corpse unceremoniously stuffed into the fridge. Yeah, gruesome stuff. The outrage of this moment resulted in the coining of the creatively named term, women in the refrigerator, also sometimes known as fridging the girlfriend, which essentially boils down to artificially heightening the stakes by killing off the love interest. It's yet another demoralizing cliche that reduces women into nothing more than plot devices. And I'm not here to get up on my soapbox and defend it, I'm just saying we should be blaming Major Force for this cliche, not Kyle himself. But I don't know, none of these people are actually real, so it doesn't really matter. Another villain Kyle would have to contend with was actually Hal himself, and he would be a recurring threat in his stories. With the power of parallax flowing through him, Hal could inflict some serious damage. But don't you worry, you Hal Jordan fans, because in the events of Final Night, he would go on to redeem himself, sacrificing his life to restart our sun. It was kind of a weird story, and Hal would eventually be brought back in the events of Green Lantern Rebirth. With all that being said, I think I've gotten my point across. There is a lot to the Green Lantern mythos. And I've only focused on Earthbound Green Lanterns today. There's so much to discuss about Kilowog, Tomar Ray, Sinestro. I mean, hell, even Abin Sur has a wealth of stories behind him, and he's normally dead in the first issue. Oh, and if you want to talk about characters beyond the core, there's the Indigo Lanterns, a bunch of heartless sociopaths who, when they're given the staff, are granted the gift of compassion and see the errors of their ways, along with, shooting lasers and real superpowers. There's the wise Blue Lantern Saint Walker, who channels the power of hope and acts as a beacon of light for those in their darkest times. We got the Star Sapphires who... Whoa. Yeah, not really beating those allegations of sexism in the comic books, are we, guys? But where was I? Oh yeah, we've got the Star Sapphires, one of whom is Carol Ferris, Hal Jordan's love interest.
It should have been me, not him!
And hell, there's even an entire sentient planet with a power ring. I mean, this universe is nuts! There really is no shortage of Green Lantern stories that are worth adapting. And that's something worth looking into as well. Green Lantern adaptation. Because there has been a real dry spell of depictions of this character beyond the printed page. But that's a topic worth diving into another day. For now, I hope I got across some of my love for the character of Green Lantern. With decades of stories behind him, there's no shortage of tales you could tell in this mythos. And I hope soon we start seeing more of this character across different mediums. But no matter what, I rest easy knowing that there's at least one thing that we can all agree on. That no matter what they make, it can't be worse than what they did last time. Right?